The Sinister Case of Dennis Rader. Church council president and Boy Scout troop leader, Dennis Rader was the perfect family man, a doting father to his son and daughter, a loving husband, and a faithful churchgoer. Little did the world know that 30 years later, he was leading a sinister double life as the infamous BTK Killer. Welcome to Lavender City. If you're new here, we would love to have you as a subscriber. Before we start, we would like to mention that our thoughts go towards everyone involved who fell victim to the horrible actions of Dennis Rader. Trigger warning: the video may contain graphic details and instances of torturing, zoosadism, pedophilia, stalking, and murder. Dennis Rader was born in 1945 on the 9th of March in Pittsburgh, Kansas, and was the eldest of 4 boys. He grew up in a fairly humble home in Wichita, a city which he would later terrorize by giving in to his murderous tendencies. Even as a teenager, Rader had a violent spark in him. In a 2005 audio interview that he did, he recounted that he would hang and torture stray animals by strangling them for kicks. He also stated that he had intense sexual fantasies that he considered being weirder than other people. Rader was obsessed with bondage pornography from an early age. He admitted to being a peeping Tom and would often steal women's underwear, cut out photos of women who he found appealing from magazines, and draw ropes and gags on them. He fantasized how he could restrain and control them. He went on to describe how he would bind his hands and ankles with rope and cover his head with a bag to see what it would feel like and would get off on it. He would later employ these techniques on his victims. On the outside, however, Rader continued to put on the facade of an ordinary man. He attended college for a while before dropping out and joining the US Air Force in 1966 as a mechanic. He spent the next 4 years working with them and would sometimes be stationed overseas. Once he returned home to Wichita, he took up a job in the meat department of a supermarket. He met his wife, Paula Diaz, through church. She was working as a bookkeeper for a snacks convenience store, and the couple soon got married in 1971, only after a few dates. They would go on to have 2 children, Brian and Kerry, and live a typical family life in Park City, in the suburbs of Wichita. But little did his family know that Dennis was finally about to turn his fantasies into reality. To support his family, he initially worked on an assembly line at Coleman, where he was intrigued by his colleague Julie Otero, a 33-year-old working mom of 5 children. She would become his first victim. Rader became obsessed with Julie Otero and began stalking and spying on her family in his free time. He also became infatuated with her 11-year-old daughter Josephine. On the morning of January 15, 1974, he forced his way into the Otero family home, but was slightly taken aback when he realized that Julie's partner, 38-year-old Joseph, and their 9-year-old son Joseph Jr. were still at home. He proceeded to hold the family at gunpoint after tying them up and strangling them one by one. He made the 2 kids watch as he killed their parents. Little Josie cried out that she loved her mom as she watched the light fade from her eyes. He then killed little Joseph Jr. and took Josie down to the basement, where he pulled down her pants and underwear before hanging her from a sewer pipe. When she asked what would become of her, Dennis calmly replied that she would be going to heaven with the rest of her family. He watched the little girl choke to death, and he masturbated while she died, leaving behind crucial DNA evidence at the crime scene. He took pictures of the lifeless bodies of the Otero family, a radio, Joseph's wristwatch, and some of Josie's underwear as mementos of his first murdering spree. Satisfied, he walked out of the front door. That evening, 15-year-old Charlie Otero and his 2 siblings would come home from school to find the horrific scene. Just 2.5 months later, on April 4, 1974, Dennis Rader struck again. He had seen 21-year-old Catherine Bright, who also incidentally worked at the Coleman plant, going into her home. Intrigued by her, he soon decided to make her one of his projects, or PJs, as he preferred to call his potential victims. On that fateful day, he broke into her house and waited for her to come home. When she did, however, her 19-year-old brother Kevin was with her. Nonetheless, he held the Bright siblings at gunpoint and made them tie each other up. Both of them tried to fight him off, and though Rader shot Kevin, he managed to escape and lived on to tell the story about the man with the psychotic eyes. Catherine was less fortunate. She was fatally stabbed 11 times in her back and torso. He would later tell detectives that she had fought like a hellcat. In October 1974, Don Granger, a member of the Wichita Eagle newspaper's editorial board, received an anonymous phone call. The caller told him that there was a letter hidden inside a mechanical engineering textbook at the public library. Granger found it and noticed that the letter was filled with spelling mistakes and poor grammar. However, it detailed the Otero murders in complete detail and stated that when this monster enters my brain, I will never know, but it's here to stay. The letter was signed, "Yours truly, guilty," and below, Rader had written his code words, or MO, BTK, bind, torture, and kill. It was written that the code would be on the next victim. Granger handed over the letter detailing the confession and warning to the Wichita Police Department, which kept it hidden from the public for months. Kathy Henkel, a reporter for the Wichita Sun, soon received a copy of the letter from an unnamed source. It was clear that the BTK killer craved public attention, and Henkel played right into it because she felt that the public has a right to know that there was a twisted murderer on the loose. On the 11th of December 1974, the Wichita Sun printed a story about the letter, alerting Wichita that they had a serial killer on their hands. Ironically, as the town was looking over its collective shoulder in fear of being murdered, Rader took up a job installing alarm systems in offices and homes for ADT security systems. With a killer on the loose, business was booming. What people didn't know was that their killer now had access to most of their homes and several PJs to choose from. Meanwhile, the BTK killer went quiet for several years, only to strike twice in 1977. He had apparently taken some time off his murder streak when his wife had told him they were expecting. He later stated that he was super excited about having a baby and got busy with the latest addition to his family and his new job. Shortly before her husband would rape and kill his sixth victim, Paula found an early draft of a poem titled Shirley Locks, in which her husband had written that she wouldn't scream but lay on the cushion and think about him and death. Paula didn't ask any questions, even as the clues were beginning to add up. So she didn't say anything when her husband marked the stories of the BTK killer in the paper with a secret code. Nor did she question him when the taunting letters the serial killer sent to the police were full of the same grammatical errors and misspellings as the letters her husband had written to her. If she had looked inside the mysteriously sealed box that he kept at home, she would have found a chest of horrors, or the motherlode as Rader called it. It contained his prized mementos, his victims' underwear, their driver's license, and pictures of himself cross-dressed in this underwear, whilst pretending to choke himself or bury himself alive, essentially reenacting the ways that he had killed them. On March 17, 1977, Rader was back to his old ways. He forced his way into 24-year-old Shirley Vian's home, tied her up, and put a plastic bag over her head before strangling her with a rope. Shirley's 3 toddlers remained locked in the bathroom the whole time, watching their mother being killed through the keyhole. While Rader was intending to murder them too, he left in a hurry when Shirley's phone began to ring. A few months later on December the 8th, he broke into Nancy Fox's home after cutting her phone lines, whilst the 25-year-old woman was off at work. When she returned home, he handcuffed her, strangled her with a belt, and masturbated over her dead body. He kept her driving license as a memento, tidied the crime scene, and headed to a payphone downtown, from where he called the police to report the murder. 2 months later, he sent a 2-page letter to Cake TV, taking responsibility for the 2 murders as the BTK killer. He wouldn't kill again for more than 7 years. The grim irony was that he used this break to get a Bachelor of Science degree with a major in Administration of Justice from Wichita State University. He graduated in 1979 and became an active member of the town's Christ Lutheran Church and was elected president of the Congregation's Council. His daughter would later describe him as a good father and strictly moral Christian. In fact, when the BTK Killer struck again, this time close to home, Kerry was consoled by her father by saying that they were safe. Rader brazenly revived his murderous ways on April 27, 1985, when he targeted his 53-year-old neighbor, Maureen Hedge, who lived just down the street from the Raiders. When Maureen got into bed to retire for the night, he jumped out of the darkness he was lurking in and strangled her with his bare hands. He took her nude body to his church, where he positioned her in various bondage poses to take photographs. He then buried her in a ditch. On September 16, 1986, he knocked on the door of his ninth victim, 28-year-old Vicky Waygirl, posing as a telephone repairman. She let him in and coerced her with a gun. He tried to tie her up, but she fought back. He choked her with a nylon stocking, took photographs of her corpse, and drove away in her car. Vicky's husband, Bill, would later on claim that he saw a stranger driving his wife's car when he was on his way home, before discovering his wife dead on the floor with their 2-year-old son, Brandon, crying in his playpen. Rader fell into family life once again and began working as a dog catcher and compliance supervisor for Park City in 1991. His neighbors recounted that he was overzealous, used the position to harass single women, and one of them even claimed he killed her dog for no reason. That same year, he would take the life of his 10th and final victim, Dolores E. Davis, a 62-year-old grandmother. On January 19th, he excused himself from a Boy Scout camping trip he was chaperoning for his son, claiming he had forgotten something at home. He drove to Dolores's home and threw a concrete block through her window to break in. He tied her up and strangled her with some pantyhose. He then dumped her body below a bridge on the outskirts of town and finally returned to the campsite, the doting father that he was. The cases remained unsolved until 2004, when, on the 30th anniversary of the Otero murders, the Wichita Eagle ran a piece on the BTK Killer who had gotten away with it all. They soon received a letter from Bill Thomas Killman, which had a photocopy of Vicky Waygirl's driver's license and photos from the crime scene. This initiated a series of 11 correspondences between the local media, the police, and Rader. He would send autobiographical writings and several pieces of evidence. In 2005, he sent a message to them asking if he could communicate via a floppy disk without it being traced back to him. The police responded through an ad in the local newspaper saying it would be okay and lured him into the bait. They retrieved metadata from a deleted document on the floppy disk, which Rader had sent to the local KSAS-TV. It had last been modified by a Dennis at the Christ Lutheran Church. The police had finally got their man through circumstantial evidence. Law enforcement then obtained his daughter's DNA secretly through a recent pap smear and matched it to the semen samples found at the BTK Killer's crime scenes and under Waygirl's fingernails. Just a little past noon on February 25, 2005, Rader was taken into custody when he returned home from work for lunch. When the officers asked him if he knew why he was being arrested, he stated that he had suspicions why. He confessed to everything, being the BTK Killer and the hidey holes where the police could find evidence. The same year, on June 27th, Dennis Rader pleaded guilty to 10 counts of first-degree murder. He received the maximum sentence of 10 consecutive life terms and is currently incarcerated at the El Dorado Correctional Facility in solitary confinement for his safety. He is only allowed out of his 80-square-foot cell for 5 one-hour periods per week. That's all for today. Do you think that Rader could have been caught sooner had his wife asked him some questions? Comment below. If you enjoyed the video, give it a big thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and smash the notification bell to not miss a single video from us. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.